The night sky hung dark over the quiet streets of Oak Ridge County as Lisa Taylor drove home from Memorial Hospital. The clock on her dashboard showed 11:30 p.m. Her body ached after 12 hours of running between hospital rooms, checking on sick children, and filling out endless charts. As a pediatric nurse, she was used to long days, but tonight had been especially tough. Lisa rolled her shoulders and adjusted her grip on the steering wheel of her silver SUV. Her thoughts drifted to happier things, to Tom, her fiancé, and the county's newly elected sheriff. A small smile touched her lips as she thought about their wedding, now just 3 months away. After dating for 4 years, they were finally taking the big step. The sudden flash of blue and red lights in her rearview mirror jolted her from these pleasant thoughts. Lisa frowned and glanced down at her speedometer. She was going exactly the speed limit. Maybe one of her taillights was out. She hadn't noticed any problems with her car lately. Following the rules she'd known all her life, Lisa carefully pulled over to the shoulder of the empty road. She turned down her radio, which had been softly playing her favorite jazz station, and reached for her purse to get her driver's license. Her heart beat a little faster, not from fear, just the natural reaction anyone gets when pulled over by police. Through her side mirror, Lisa watched as Officer Kevin Wilson approached. Something about his walk seemed off. He moved with stiff, deliberate steps, one hand resting on his holstered gun. This wasn't the casual approach she was used to seeing during routine traffic stops. A small knot of worry formed in her stomach. The beam from Officer Wilson's flashlight swept across her car before landing directly on her face, momentarily blinding her. Lisa squinted and raised a hand to block the harsh light. That's when she noticed how the officer's expression changed. His eyes narrowed and his jaw tightened when he saw her, a black woman, behind the wheel of the SUV. License and registration, he demanded without any greeting or explanation. His voice came out sharp and cold in the night air. Lisa kept her movements slow and deliberate as she handed her documents through the window. "Good evening, officer," she said politely, her voice steady despite her growing unease. "May I ask why I was pulled over? I don't think I was speeding." Officer Wilson's eyes flickered over her hospital ID badge, still clipped to her blue scrubs. He ignored her question completely, instead studying her license with exaggerated care. "This is a nice car for someone like you," he remarked, his emphasis making the words feel like an accusation rather than an observation. Lisa blinked, confused by the comment. "I've had it for 3 years," she replied. "Is there a problem with my driving or my vehicle?" The officer's face hardened. He shined his flashlight into the back seat of her car, sweeping it across the empty space. "I've received reports of suspicious activity in this area. Step out of the vehicle now," he ordered, his hand moving to rest more obviously on his weapon. The knot in Lisa's stomach tightened. This wasn't right. She'd done nothing wrong, and there was no reason for her to exit her car. But she also knew the potential dangers of the situation. She'd heard too many stories about routine stops going terribly wrong. "Officer," she tried again, her voice remarkably calm despite her racing heart. "I'm just heading home from my shift at the hospital. I don't understand why." I said, "Step out of the vehicle." Officer Wilson cut her off, his voice rising. He stepped back and placed his hand directly on his holstered gun, his posture making it clear this wasn't a request. The night suddenly felt colder as Lisa reached for her door handle, her mind racing through what to do next. With her heart pounding against her ribs, Lisa stepped out of her car into the cool night air. The asphalt felt solid beneath her tired feet as she stood in her light blue hospital scrubs, her ID badge still clipped to her pocket. The smell of damp earth from recent rain mixed with the exhaust fumes from Officer Wilson's idling patrol car. "Why am I being asked to get out of my vehicle?" Lisa tried again, her voice remarkably steady despite her growing fear. She wrapped her arms around herself, partly from the chill and partly as a protective gesture. Officer Wilson circled her, his flashlight beam traveling up and down her body in a way that made her skin crawl. "As I said, we've had reports of drug trafficking in this area," he replied, his tone suggesting he was reciting from a script rather than responding to a genuine concern. "Your vehicle matches the description we're looking for." Lisa glanced back at her car, a silver Honda CR-V, possibly the most common SUV on American roads. The absurdity of his claim might have made her laugh in different circumstances. "Officer Wilson," she said, pointing to her hospital badge, "I'm a pediatric nurse at Memorial. I just finished a 12-hour shift caring for sick children. I'm heading home to get some sleep before I go back tomorrow." Her reasonable explanation seemed to bounce off him. His eyes narrowed as if her profession made her more suspicious, not less. "Turn around and place your hands on the hood of my patrol car," he ordered, his voice hardening. Lisa felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "Have I done something wrong? I don't understand." "Now." His voice cracked like a whip in the quiet night. His hand moved to his holster again, a subtle threat that wasn't lost on Lisa. With no choice but to comply, Lisa walked to the patrol car and placed her palms on the hood. The metal felt cold against her skin. A car passed on the road, slowing slightly as the driver noticed the scene, then speeding up again. Lisa wondered if they could see her face, if they could tell something wasn't right. Without warning, Officer Wilson began patting her down, his hands moving over her body. There was something in his touch, something lingering and deliberate, that made bile rise in her throat. His hands moved across her back, down her sides, along her legs. The search went far beyond what was necessary or appropriate. "I don't consent to this search," Lisa said firmly, her medical training kicking in, helping her maintain composure despite her humiliation. "I've done nothing wrong, and you have no probable cause." Officer Wilson's face darkened. "Oh, so you're a lawyer now too," he sneered, "telling me how to do my job." In one swift motion, he grabbed her arms, pulling them behind her back with unnecessary force. The cold metal of handcuffs bit into her wrists as he fastened them too tightly. "Ow!" Lisa gasped, the pain sharp and immediate. "Those are too tight." Resistance and interfering with an officer, Wilson muttered, roughly spinning her around to face him. "We'll add that to the list. You people always think you know better, don't you?" The phrase "you people" hung in the air between them like poison. Lisa's throat tightened as she realized what was really happening. This wasn't about any traffic violation. This wasn't about suspicious vehicles. This was about who she was, a black woman driving through this neighborhood at night. "I want to call my fiance," Lisa said, struggling to keep her voice from shaking. She thought of Tom, probably already wondering why she wasn't home yet. Wilson laughed, a harsh sound in the quiet night. "You'll get your phone call when we get to the station. Right now, we're going to have a look in that car of yours. I bet we find something interesting, don't you think?" As he led her toward his patrol car, Lisa's thumb pressed against the side button of her smartwatch, a safety feature Tom had insisted she set up when he became sheriff. The emergency alert was now silently transmitting her location to him. Her dignity might be under attack, but her hope wasn't gone yet. Across the street at the all-night gas station, Professor Alan Chen was paying for his coffee when movement outside caught his eye. Through the large windows, he noticed the police lights and a woman in what looked like medical scrubs, standing with her hands on a patrol car. Something about the scene didn't feel right. Alan stepped outside, coffee forgotten on the counter. The night air hit his face as he squinted to get a better look. The officer's aggressive body language and the woman's clear distress were visible even from this distance. 20 years of teaching law had taught Alan to recognize the difference between proper police procedure and something else entirely. Without hesitation, he pulled out his phone and began recording. The camera caught Officer Wilson roughly handcuffing the woman, caught the unnecessary force, caught the way he leaned in too close when speaking to her. Alan zoomed in as best he could, trying to capture every detail. "Hey, what's going on over there?" asked the gas station attendant who had followed Alan outside. "I'm not sure," Alan replied quietly, keeping his phone steady. "But something's not right. That officer is being way too aggressive with that woman." As he recorded, Alan could hear snippets of conversation carrying across the empty street. The woman's calm, reasonable voice contrasted sharply with the officer's harsh tones. Then he heard something that made his blood run cold. "People like you don't belong in this neighborhood," the officer said, his voice clear in the quiet night. "I'm going to make sure you understand that." Alan's jaw tightened. As a Chinese-American man who had faced his share of prejudice, those words hit him like a physical blow. There was no mistaking the officer's meaning. "I'm calling this in," Alan told the attendant, who nodded in worried agreement. With his phone still recording, Alan dialed the police department with his other hand. After 2 rings, a dispatcher answered. "Police department, what's your emergency?" "Hello, my name is Professor Alan Chen from Oak Ridge University Law School," he began, speaking clearly and using his title deliberately. "I'm witnessing what appears to be officer misconduct at the intersection of Maple and 4th Street. An officer has handcuffed a woman who appears to be a healthcare worker, and I just heard him make explicitly biased comments toward her." The silence on the other end of the line lasted a beat too long. "We'll look into it, sir," the dispatcher finally replied, her tone flat and unconvincing. "I'm recording this incident," Alan added, hoping this might prompt more concern. "And I've clearly captured the officer's inappropriate comments. As I said, we'll look into it," the dispatcher repeated, sounding almost bored. "An officer will be sent to check the situation when one becomes available." Meanwhile, across the street, Officer Wilson had begun tearing through Lisa's vehicle. Alan watched as he pulled items from her glove compartment, rifled through her backseat, and dumped the contents of her purse onto the passenger seat. All while Lisa stood handcuffed beside the patrol car, shivering slightly in the cool night air. Alan felt helpless rage building inside him. As a law professor, he taught his students about proper police procedure, about civil rights, about the protections every citizen should have. Yet here he was, watching those rights being trampled less than 100 yards away. He ended the call with the unhelpful dispatcher and dialed another number, the direct line to the county sheriff's office that he had from a legal clinic they had co-hosted last year. Maybe they would take this more seriously. What none of them knew was that help was already on the way. At the sheriff's department across town, Tom Taylor had received Lisa's emergency alert. The small device on his desk had lit up with her location, sending a chill through his body. Tom had insisted Lisa set up this emergency system after hearing too many stories of traffic stops gone wrong. He never imagined his own fiance would need to use it. "Garcia," Tom called to his deputy, already grabbing his jacket and keys. "Lisa's in trouble. Get a car to the corner of Maple and 4th now." As Alan continued recording from the gas station, as Officer Wilson continued his illegal search, and as Lisa stood shivering in handcuffs, the sound of distant sirens began to echo through the quiet streets of Oak Ridge County. Sheriff Tom Taylor gripped his steering wheel tightly as he sped through the quiet streets of Oak Ridge County. The digital clock on his dashboard read 12:08 a.m. 8 minutes had passed since Lisa's emergency alert had gone off, 8 minutes too long. His mind raced with terrible possibilities, each worse than the last. Come on, he muttered, tapping his fingers impatiently at a red light despite there being no other cars in sight. After what felt like forever, the light changed, and he pressed the gas pedal hard. The radio crackled to life. "Sheriff, this is Deputy Garcia. I'm 2 minutes out from the location." "Good. What do we know?" Tom asked, relieved his most trusted deputy would arrive first. "Officer Kevin Wilson from City PT has detained a woman matching Lisa's description. No clear reason given for the stop. Dispatch says a witness at the gas station across the street has called in with concerns about the officer's conduct." Tom's jaw tightened. He knew Wilson by reputation, an officer with a history of complaints that somehow never stuck. The kind of cop who made the good ones look bad. "I'm 1 minute behind you. Approach carefully. Remember, this is city jurisdiction. We need to handle this by the book." "Understood, Sheriff." As Tom turned onto Maple Street, he saw the scene unfold before him. Lisa standing handcuffed next to Wilson's patrol car, her belongings scattered across the hood of her SUV. Wilson was still rifling through her car, frustration evident in his jerky movements. Deputy Garcia had just pulled up, stepping out of his vehicle with careful, measured movements. Tom parked his car and took a deep breath. He needed to stay calm, stay professional. He couldn't let his personal feelings interfere with how he handled this, no matter how much his heart was pounding with rage at seeing Lisa in handcuffs. He stepped out of his car, straightening his sheriff's uniform jacket. The cool night air carried the scent of wet pavement and car exhaust. Across the street, he noticed a man in glasses recording the scene on his phone, the witness, he presumed. "Deputy," Tom acknowledged Garcia with a nod before turning to Officer Wilson. "What's going on here, Officer Wilson?" Wilson's head snapped up, recognition and something like worry flashing across his face when he saw the county sheriff approaching. He straightened his posture, trying to look authoritative despite being caught off guard. "Just a routine drug stop, Sheriff," Wilson said, his voice carrying a forced casualness. This woman was acting suspiciously. "Suspiciously how?" Tom asked, keeping his voice level despite the anger building in his chest. He walked closer to Lisa, noting the too tight handcuffs, the red marks forming on her wrists, the way she stood with dignity despite her obvious distress. "You okay?" he asked her quietly. Lisa nodded slightly, her eyes expressing everything her words couldn't. Wilson stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "With all due respect, Sheriff, this is city jurisdiction. I had reports of drug trafficking in the area and this vehicle." "This vehicle is a Honda CR-V, the most common SUV in America," Tom interrupted, his patience wearing thin. "And this woman acting suspiciously is a pediatric nurse coming home from a 12-hour shift at Memorial Hospital." He paused, letting his words sink in. "She's also my fiancée." The color drained from Wilson's face as the implications hit him. His mouth opened and closed without words coming out. "Now, Officer Wilson," Tom continued, his voice dangerously calm, "I'd like you to explain to me what probable cause you had to pull over this vehicle, conduct a search, and place Ms. Taylor in handcuffs." Wilson's expression hardened as he tried to recover. "I don't have to explain myself to county. This is city jurisdiction, and I have reason to believe." "What you have," Tom cut in, his voice sharp enough to stop Wilson mid-sentence, "is an illegal detention with no probable cause. You have an unauthorized search without consent or warrant. You have a clear violation of department policies on proper search procedures, and all of this is apparently being recorded by a concerned citizen across the street." Tom gestured toward the man with the phone, who gave a small wave in confirmation. "Remove those handcuffs. Now." Tom's voice left no room for argument. Wilson hesitated, looking from Tom to Lisa and back again, weighing his options. The air between them felt charged with tension as nearby, Deputy Garcia stood watchful, hand resting casually near his holster, not threatening, but present. "I said," Tom repeated, each word precise and measured, "remove those handcuffs." Under the glow of streetlights and the red and blue flashes from the patrol cars, Officer Wilson slowly reached for his keys, his face a mask of barely contained anger as he realized he had no choice but to comply. The morning after the incident, Lisa sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. Her wrists still showed faint red marks from the handcuffs. Outside, spring sunlight streamed through the windows, a stark contrast to the darkness of the previous night. "You should eat something," Tom said gently, placing a plate of toast beside her. Lisa nodded but didn't reach for the food. "I keep replaying it in my head," she said quietly. The way he looked at me, like I was less than human, like I didn't belong there. Tom sat down beside her, taking her hand carefully. "What he did was wrong. All of it. And he's going to face consequences." Before Lisa could respond, her phone buzzed with a notification. When she checked it, her eyes widened. "What is it?" Tom asked. Lisa turned the phone toward him. On the screen was a video from last night. Officer Wilson handcuffing her, searching her car, and most damning of all, his clear statement, "People like you don't belong in this neighborhood." "It's already got 50,000 views," Lisa whispered. "Professor Chen posted it early this morning." The video spread like wildfire across social media platforms. By noon, local news stations were running the story. By evening, national outlets had picked it up. The clip showing Officer Wilson's face when he realized he had detained the sheriff's fiancée became a meme shared thousands of times over. Lisa's phone rang constantly, reporters seeking comments, friends and family offering support, and strangers expressing outrage on her behalf. The attention was overwhelming. "I never wanted to be the center of something like this," Lisa told Tom as they watched yet another news segment about the incident. "But now that it's happening, I need to make it count for something." 3 days after the incident, Lisa met with Patricia Johnson, one of the state's most respected civil rights attorneys, in a sunlit office downtown. Patricia's wall was lined with framed newspaper articles about cases she had won against police departments and government agencies. "They're going to offer you a settlement," Patricia explained, her voice firm but kind. "They'll want you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. They'll want this to go away quietly." Lisa shook her head. "This isn't about money." "I know," Patricia nodded. "Tell me what it is about for you." Lisa took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "It's about making sure no one else goes through what I did. If this happened to me." A nurse engaged to the county sheriff. What happens to people without those connections? What happens to them when there's no one filming? While Lisa prepared to fight her battle in court, the Oak Ridge City Police Department was scrambling. Internal Affairs pulled Officer Wilson's personnel file, revealing what many already knew but few had documented: a pattern of complaints spanning his 8-year career. Complaints of racial profiling, excessive force, and harassment, all dismissed, buried, or explained away. Chief Roberts called an emergency meeting with the city's legal team. "How bad is this?" he asked, his face grim. The head lawyer didn't sugarcoat it. "Bad. We have video evidence of clear misconduct. The victim is beyond reproach. A pediatric nurse with no criminal record. She's engaged to the county sheriff, who witnessed part of the incident. And now we've got this file showing a pattern of similar complaints against Officer Wilson that were never properly addressed. Can we settle?" another official asked. "We can try," the lawyer replied. "But my sources say she's retained Patricia Johnson. This isn't going away with a check and an NDA." Meanwhile, Lisa returned to work at Memorial Hospital, where she was met with hugs from colleagues and awkward stares from those who had seen her on the news. She did her best to focus on her patients. The children who needed her care didn't care about viral videos or pending lawsuits. During her lunch break, she checked her phone to find dozens of new messages. Among them was an email that made her breath catch. "I saw what happened to you," it read. "The same officer did something similar to me last year, but no one believed me. Would you talk to your lawyer about my case too?" As Lisa scrolled down, she found 5 more emails just like it from different people, all sharing similar experiences with Officer Wilson. With shaking hands, she forwarded them to Patricia. What had seemed like her personal nightmare was revealing itself to be part of something much larger, a pattern that had gone unchecked for far too long. "This ends now," she whispered to herself, a new determination settling over her as she returned to her patients. The courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations as people filed in, filling every available seat. It was the first day of the civil rights case Taylor v. Wilson and the Oak Ridge City Police Department. Outside, news vans lined the street, their satellite dishes pointed skyward. Lisa smoothed her navy blue dress and took a deep breath. She had chosen the outfit carefully, professional but not flashy. Her mother had always told her that how you present yourself matters, especially in places like courtrooms. "Ready?" Patricia asked, placing a reassuring hand on Lisa's arm. "As ready as I'll ever be," Lisa replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Tom sat directly behind her in the gallery, a solid presence at her back. Next to him were 4 other people, the ones who had reached out with their own stories about Officer Wilson. Their presence gave Lisa strength. This wasn't just about her anymore. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise." The Honorable Judge Eleanor Walker presiding. Judge Walker, a stern woman with silver-streaked hair and piercing eyes, entered the courtroom. After the formalities, Patricia rose to deliver her opening statement. "Your Honor, this case is about more than one traffic stop gone wrong," she began, her voice clear and confident. "It's about a pattern of behavior that has been allowed to continue unchecked. It's about what happens when those sworn to protect and serve instead profile and harass." Across the aisle, Wilson sat with his defense team, his face carefully blank. He wore his dress uniform, medals gleaming under the fluorescent lights. His lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Bennett, leaned over to whisper something in his ear. Over the next several days, the evidence mounted. Professor Chen's video was played for the court, the officer's words echoing through the silent room. "People like you don't belong in this neighborhood." The defense argued that Wilson had been following protocol based on a legitimate tip about drug trafficking. But when pressed by Patricia, they couldn't produce any record of such a tip being called in that night. "Isn't it true," Patricia asked the police department's record keeper, "that there was no alert about drug trafficking in that area on the night in question?" The woman shifted uncomfortably. I don't see any record of it in our system. No further questions, Patricia said, the point made. On the third day, Lisa took the stand. She felt the weight of every eye in the courtroom as she swore to tell the truth. Ms. Taylor, Patricia began gently, can you tell the court what happened on the night of April 15th? Lisa recounted everything, the long hospital shift, the flashing lights in her mirror, the growing fear as Officer Wilson's behavior became increasingly aggressive and inappropriate. He made me feel less than human, Lisa said, her voice catching slightly. Like I was guilty of something just for existing in that neighborhood. During cross-examination, Bennett tried to poke holes in her story. Isn't it true that you refused to comply with Officer Wilson's reasonable requests? He asked, his tone suggesting she was somehow at fault. No, Lisa replied firmly. I complied with every lawful request. I questioned why I was being detained, which is my right as a citizen. And isn't it convenient that your fiancé is the county sheriff? Bennett continued. Some might say this whole case is just a turf war between county and city law enforcement. Patricia stood immediately. Objection. Counsel is testifying, not questioning. Sustained, Judge Walker ruled, had disapproval evident. Counsel will stick to questions, not insinuations. The most damning testimony came from unexpected places. 3 other individuals described similar experiences with Wilson, all people of color, all stopped in the same neighborhood, all subjected to searches without cause. Then came the internal affairs officer who reluctantly admitted, under oath, that complaints against Wilson had been systematically downplayed or dismissed over the years. We were told to handle things internally, he explained, avoiding eye contact with Wilson, to protect the department's reputation. Throughout the trial, Wilson maintained his composure, though his jaw clenched tighter with each new testimony. When his turn came to take the stand, he spoke with practiced confidence. I was doing my job, he insisted, following my training. This case is being blown out of proportion because of who Miss Taylor is engaged to. But his carefully constructed defense began to crumble under Patricia's cross-examination. Officer Wilson, she asked, holding up a transcript, is this your voice on your own body camera footage saying, and I quote, we need to keep these people out of our neighborhoods? Wilson's face flushed. That was taken out of context. Please explain the context in which that statement would be appropriate for an officer sworn to protect all citizens equally, Patricia pressed. The courtroom fell silent, waiting for an answer that never came. After 2 intense weeks of testimony and 3 long days of jury deliberation, the day of the verdict finally arrived. The courtroom was packed even tighter than before, with people standing along the back wall. The air felt thick with anticipation. Lisa sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to keep them from shaking. She wore a simple blue blouse and dark pants, clothes she had picked out the night before with care, laying them flat on her bed while Tom watched from the doorway. No matter what happens tomorrow, he had told her, you've already won. You stood up when most people would have stayed quiet. Now, as the jury filed in, Lisa searched their faces for any hint of their decision. They looked tired, their expressions guarded. Next to her, Patricia squeezed her arm gently. All rise, called the bailiff as Judge Walker entered the courtroom. After everyone was seated, the judge turned to the jury. Has the jury reached a verdict? The forewoman, a middle-aged teacher with kind eyes, stood. We have, Your Honor. Lisa held her breath as the woman unfolded a piece of paper. The room was so quiet you could hear the ceiling fan spinning overhead. In the case of Taylor versus Wilson and the Oak Ridge City Police Department, on the count of violation of civil rights under color of law, we find the defendant, Officer Kevin Wilson, guilty. A small gasp rippled through the courtroom. Lisa felt Patricia's hand tighten on her arm. On the count of false imprisonment, we find the defendant guilty. Lisa's heart pounded in her chest. On the count of official misconduct, we find the defendant guilty. Across the aisle, Wilson sat perfectly still, his face draining of color with each verdict. His attorney scribbled furiously on a yellow legal pad. Furthermore, the forewoman continued, we find the Oak Ridge City Police Department liable for negligent supervision and for fostering a culture that enabled these violations. The judge nodded. Thank you. The verdict is entered into the record. She turned to address the full courtroom. I will now proceed with sentencing and remedies. Judge Walker removed her glasses, her gaze direct and unflinching. "Officer Wilson, please rise." Wilson stood slowly, his uniform suddenly looking too large for him. "This court has rarely seen such a clear-cut case of abuse of power," the judge began, her voice carrying easily through the silent room. "Your actions were not a momentary lapse in judgment, but part of a pattern of behavior that reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of your role as a police officer." Wilson stared straight ahead, his jaw muscles working. "You were entrusted with protecting all citizens equally under the law. Instead, you used your badge as a weapon against those you personally deemed unwelcome in your community." The judge paused, letting her words sink in. "This court hereby orders the following. Officer Kevin Wilson is permanently stripped of his badge and prohibited from serving in any law enforcement capacity anywhere in this state. You will personally pay damages to Ms. Taylor in the amount of $250,000. Wilson flinched visibly at the sum. Additionally, the judge continued, turning her attention to the police department representatives. This court orders the Oak Ridge City Police Department to be placed under federal oversight for a period of no less than 3 years. You will implement comprehensive anti-bias training for all officers. You will establish a transparent civilian review board with actual authority to investigate complaints. And you will pay punitive damages in the amount of $1.5 million to establish a victims' compensation fund for those who have experienced similar misconduct." The police chief's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Finally, Judge Walker concluded, "The department will undergo a complete review of all complaints filed in the last 10 years, with special attention to those dismissed without proper investigation." She brought down her gavel with a sharp crack. "This court is adjourned." The room erupted in sound, reporters rushing for the doors, people talking excitedly, the scrape of chairs. Through it all, Lisa sat perfectly still, unable to believe it was finally over. When she finally stood to leave, she found herself face to face with Wilson for the first time since that night. The once confident officer now looked broken, his future destroyed by his own actions. Their eyes met briefly before he was led away by his attorney. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered on the steps. News cameras pointed at Lisa as she emerged into the bright sunshine with Patricia and Tom at her sides. Reporters shouted questions, their voices overlapping. "Ms. Taylor, how do you feel about the verdict? Will you continue to pursue reforms in the police department? What's your message to Officer Wilson?" Patricia raised a hand, calling for quiet. When the noise died down, she turned to Lisa. "Would you like to say a few words?" Lisa hadn't planned to speak, but looking at the crowd, seeing the faces of the others who had testified, seeing Professor Chen with his camera now hanging around his neck, seeing young people holding signs that read "Justice for all," she stepped forward to the microphones. "Today isn't just a victory for me," she began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "It's a step toward justice for everyone who has ever been profiled, harassed, or made to feel less than human by those sworn to protect them." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I'm a nurse. I believe in healing. But healing can't begin without acknowledging the wound. What happened to me wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a system that has hurt too many people for too long." The cameras flashed as she continued. "I don't celebrate the fact that Officer Wilson lost his job today. I don't take joy in anyone's downfall. What I celebrate is the possibility that this verdict represents, the possibility of change, of a world where the color of your skin doesn't determine how you're treated by those in power." She looked over at Tom, who nodded encouragingly. This case was never about money or revenge. It was about accountability. And accountability is just the first step toward building the kind of community where everyone feels safe, where everyone belongs. As she stepped back from the microphones, the crowd erupted in applause. Tom wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and they walked down the courthouse steps together into the bright afternoon sunshine, not as sheriff and nurse, not as witnesses to injustice, but as two people who had helped bend the long arc of history just a little more toward justice.